Well, let's talk about some other interviewers since we both love the art of interviewing. Um, who are some of you? I know, yeah, we'll talk about one of our favorites in a minute, but before I do, let's maybe give you a chance to name some of your favorites.
Okay, that's a great question. I like Larry King a lot. I learned a lot from Larry King. Uh, got to talk to him a little bit. It was, you know, I was way over my head, I think. Uh, Larry King taught me that you've got to put yourself in your audience's shoes. Don't assume that because you know something that they know it.
Yeah.
So Larry King is on there. Charlie Rose, say what you want about him. He did some phenomenal interviews in his time. There's a guy, he is retired from interviewing. Elliot Mintz is his name, and he hosted the Lost Lennon tapes and also was the publicist for everyone from Bob Dylan to Paris Hilton. How's that for a list?
Pretty
Elliot
good.
Mintz, yeah, absolutely. Elliot Mintz is he's somebody who just has an incredible interviewing ability. Terry Gross,
Of course.
you know, golly, she's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
So
remember the first time I ever heard her. It's, that's one of the reasons I like her so much is because I remember the first time I heard her. It was pretty neat. Yeah.
yeah, she's I would love to be able to talk to her sometime.
Yeah, me too. I had always fantasized about interviewing her. She actually had someone interview her on her show one time. I don't know if you
Yeah.
caught that. Um, it was kind of funny. He was kind of comical about the way he interviewed her. I don't remember the name of the man. He almost did it in a joking way, and
Yeah.
she responded very seriously. So perhaps his approach was the best one, because she was his straight man or straight woman, as it were.
I think I remember that actually.
Yeah.
Was that Mark Maron maybe that
Maybe,
interviewed?
yeah, it was done
Yeah,
live.
yeah.
It was done live. And again, I would have done it completely differently. I really would have Terry Gross, and he did not. And perhaps he was correct.
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, you haven't mentioned, and I'm glad you haven't, because I get to talk about Bob Edwards. Uh,
Right.
Now, when I heard Bob Edwards, I just kind of was amazed. He was like judo master interview. Like, what's going on here? These interviews are different. There's something
Yeah.
happening in these interviews that is not happening in other interviews. People are talking more and it's going deeper, but I don't hear Bob doing anything all that special. What is happening?
Yeah, Bob Edwards is, maybe not mentioned as much as Larry King and Terry Gross, but he is some of the best interviews ever. I mean, I can remember times where I would be driving around listening to, I guess it was WABE in
Yeah.
Atlanta there, and I would just think, holy cow, this guy he's on a different level.
Yeah.
And he, especially when it comes to singer songwriters, and Bob Edwards has such a great taste in music. You can tell when he really, really likes a certain artist. And the stuff that he likes is the stuff that I really freak out about, like Randy Newman or.
Yeah. 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 And it was a pleasure to have him tell you how he does it. And it kind of confirmed, he really likes conversations and they're not scripted and they're not overly edited. He lets
Right.
them talk for a long time and their pauses, and it's wonderful.
It is. In fact, I'm just thinking now that, like, what makes Bob Edwards great, aside from his incredible interviewing ability, he somehow comes across like he's got a crisp professional voice that you would kind of expect. The name of his book was A Voice in the Box, I think. He has a radio voice, but he also somehow has this folksy thing
Yeah.
where you could imagine him walking into a diner, getting a cup of coffee, or meeting him at, a gas station somewhere out, way out in the sticks. He somehow does that. Like you can imagine him engaging in a really, really serious, intelligent conversation, but also you could imagine him talking about baseball or something like that too.
Yeah, right. Doesn't take himself too seriously, maybe.
That's probably fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Not that he doesn't take himself seriously. He does, but not as if, aren't you glad you're on my show?
R- right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
He said something I want to repeat on this show. He said that he thought interviewing was the most intimate thing you can do without having sex. I thought,
Yeah.
wow. And I understand what he meant because I've experienced that. It's been very interesting in my brief interviewing career, talking to people and feeling close to them. But there's a downside he didn't mention, and I want to talk to you about it.
Hmm.
I kind of expected when I first started that after I interviewed someone, we'd have a connection and it would maintain. But I find that most of the time, once the interview is over, the connection is gone again, and it pains me a little bit. It makes me sad. It's like, oh, I got to talk to you and we talked and I enjoyed it, and now it's over and I really can't talk to you anymore. Have you experienced that?
Absolutely. And that's a very interesting thing. And it's a misconception that people have. You know, there are times where people will say, well, why don't you just get back in touch with him? He knows you. You interviewed him. And that's not how it works.
Right.
And if you do interviews, you have to kind of accept what comes with the territory. And one of those things is it really is very, very much like two ships passing in the night. In some ways, it is like Bob Edwards said, it is this very, very intimate thing. But if it is, more often than not, it's a one night stand. I mean, I'm sorry to use such a vulgar
He
description, but
started it. Yeah.
he started it exactly. But that's what it's like. Usually, and I mean, there have been times where after I did the interview with somebody, when the connection on Zoom ended, or especially in the old days when the phone hung up, I never heard a word from that person ever again. And, nothing, like nothing at all. And that kind of just comes with the territory. That's just the way it is. And I actually read, I've looked for this article ever since. There was an article about celebrity interviewing. I probably read this like 15, 16, maybe longer ago. And it said all these different things, the rules for celebrity interviewing. And one of them was that it was like, listen, these people they're not really your friends. And in many ways, they are using you. And in many ways, you're kind of using them. You're both getting something out of it, though. And there's other rules like they can be late, you can't be late. It's not exactly what a lot of people may think, and it's not what I thought either. So I'm right there with you. But there are those little exceptions that have definitely, and those are the ones that I usually cherish the most, the ones that the relationship has continued and it's special. And that's what I want, now as I'm going into 20 years now. I want more of that. I want more of, I, I only want to interview people who I could potentially interview again. Like I'm less and less about the the one night stand of
Yeah.
interviews. Yeah.
Well, okay. So, I mean, you've described yourself as an archivist, and I deeply respect that. I have my own mission in my interviewing, my own path, and yours is let's get these stories down. I want to be an
Right.
archivist. Early on, was there a sense of conquest in it? Can you be honest about that? You can say
Uh,
yes or no.
oh yeah, absolutely. And there's little remnants of that still, but I had these ideas about like I had this number in mind, and I'll admit I still have this. I have an obsession with the number 1,000.
Yeah.
And to me, I just think that would be like, what would that feel like to hit 1,000? So there's still a little bit of that, but there's less of, you know, I used to, I used to kind of get a little bummed out when I would try to interview somebody and it wouldn't go through, which, as it's like if you, well, at least I should speak for myself, that for every interview that's a success, there might be 5 or 6 that, you know, the person doesn't share your idea
Yeah.
of doing an interview.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I care less about that. You know, I really, you know, I've thought like, if nobody ever wanted to interview me again, you know, I could interview my mom.
Hmm.
And that would be really fun.
Yeah. I'm
You know,
not laughing at all. I totally understand what you're saying.
yeah, yeah, that's where I'm at now.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm finding to my surprise, and maybe I shouldn't be surprised, that the people who are just people, just, people who nobody knows, they've still got amazing stories to tell. They're very interesting people. And sometimes, even if they're obscure, there is no talent difference. They're brilliant people, and they just didn't get the break, or they just don't want to spend their life in the same way. They don't have that mania. And yet they're fascinating, and their work deserves to be heard. So it's worthwhile interviewing them.
You are absolutely right. And in fact, I would maybe go a little further and say that perhaps the unknowns are the more interesting. You know, I guys think sometimes, what would it be like to interview somebody like Bob Dylan? Or what would it be like to interview Johnny Mathis, maybe? And you're interviewing them for sure, but you're also kind of interviewing, in some ways, the construction that they've made. And so they're not really meeting you. And I haven't met either of those people, so maybe I'm wrong, but they're kind of filtering you through the world that they made for themselves.
Yeah.
And so maybe if you get to talk to Bob Dylan's, you know, one of his producers or even his bus driver, you're really meeting that guy, because he doesn't have any conception of himself. He's not trying to impress people. He's just being real with you.
Yeah. And you may
So
learn more about Bob Dylan that way.
most likely you will. That's
Terry
been
Gross
my
interviewed
experience.
Terry Gross interviewed Frank Sinatra's valet one time. It was a really interesting interview for that very reason.
And there's a lot, especially in the Frank Sinatra world, the people, the satellite people, and you can learn so much from them. But yeah, Terry Gross has the right idea. You want to
Yeah.
talk to Sinatra's valet for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Hmm. Um, well, what let me see if I can get you to say what you want listeners to take away from an interview. What do you want them to leave with when they've listened to something you've done?
I want the listener or the viewer to love the person that I'm talking to as much as I do. That's really it. You know, I know that that maybe sounds like a corny thing to say, but I love the people that I talk to. Like, I can't think of anybody in all of the many, many, many interviews that I've done where I don't feel like I somehow walked away thinking that I knew that person better. And like, I can think of one person in that list who I won't tell you the name of, but he was a real jerk to me. But I still, I still kind of feel like, you know, I care about that person because they sat down with me and they were willing to tell me what they were feeling. Like, I do feel like I really connected with that person.
Hmm.
So I want people to see that this person has done something great, that they had it in them to do it, that they're just a person at the same time. They're a human being, no, you know, just like you are, but at the same time, they've done this great thing. And I want them to admire the guest, because usually when I interview somebody, it's because I admire them. And so I hope that they admire. And then, you know, I used to always think about this, and I still think about it from time to time when I'm talking to somebody. There are so many things that people have said to me where I thought something like, I didn't know anybody felt that way too.
Hmm.
And that's a really terrific moment, is when somebody says something and you just think, I, you know, that was me too, or I experienced that too. I'm not alone.
Yeah.
That's a powerful thing.
Funny, JD Souther's interview for me was like that. I felt very connected to him. Like I felt, oh, like,
Huh.
yeah, we're alike in some ways. And that's kind of neat to feel like that.
JD Souther, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I can't, what ego, right, to say that I have a lot in common with JD Souther. But the point is that I felt that way. His interview was very personable, and he talked about a lot of things he was interested in that I was interested in too. And he expressed opinions that I shared. And I came away feeling like, oh, yeah, I could have a beer with you and we'd have something to talk about. That was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, and you may be onto something because we had that interview. We were sitting down at a table uh at I think it was at the Ritz-Carlton.
Yes. And he was eating his dinner, getting ready to go on
Yeah.
stage. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there was that certain, because we all do, we even use that uh, you know, expression break bread. Like we're all human beings and eating does make somebody more human. It's one of the reasons why it's so good to eat with somebody. It's a pleasure, but also if you want to really get to know somebody, it can be, you know,
You weren't eating, though. Were you eating too?
well, I'm a fast eater.
Okay.
I had eaten. He
Okay.
was he was. I don't remember what I got. I remember he got fish.
Yeah. He mentioned it and you
Yeah,
left it in.
yeah. It looked really good. I remember that. And
Yeah.
JD Souther, I have to say, in terms of people that I met that I just thought were, to use the word cool, he is so cool. Like he walked into the dining room there of the restaurant. He just looked like a rock star. Not in a way like I'm demanding you look at me like a pink shirt or anything. He just looked like he could have been, if he wasn't an American, he could have been a Beatle, if you know what I mean. Like he
Yeah.
just looked debonair. And I remember the people at the Ritz Carlton, they knew who he was because he walked in the door and the one guy snapped his fingers at the other guy, like, "Hey, that's JD Souther. That is our VIP." And right away they rushed over. But he was cool in the sense that, you know, like he asked a question that maybe some people would think, well, I thought I should just put it. I thought like, wow, I'm just way out of my league here, because he was asking like what kind of water we should get, and I was thinking like, you know, I'm just some peasant, JD. Like I don't know any members of the Eagles, and I was like, I don't know, and he said, I don't know, maybe uh he named what brand of water he wanted, and he asked the waiter for that. But he did it in a way that didn't come across like I still couldn't talk to him. I was
Yeah.
just impressed with him in every way because he's a sophisticated person. You probably got that from listening to the interview.
Yes.
Sophisticated, but not at all pompous. Not at
Mm.
all, he was just sitting there having a meal with me.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, quite so. That was the impression I got, which is what I enjoyed, that you were able to present him that way. And you could have presented him a different way, but you managed to give him the gift of being himself in that way. Well, let's talk about what you want your guests to take away from an interview.
hmm, what do I want them to take away? You know, I hope that they had a fun time. I mean, I've had some people who have said that was the most different interview I've ever done. They've said things like that. That's always thrilling to hear for sure. Uh, I hope that they think that I'm being myself, because I am. And I hope that they can pick up on the fact that I respect them, because I respect them. And that doesn't matter if they are, this A-list musician, or, you know, like I've had people who have told me, they've said, I've, they have all these credits in music. They've done all these things. But then they say, nobody has ever recorded my voice. No one ever got my story down. And I hope that they feel like I view them as big of a star as the marquee name because that's how I see them. I mean, I see the songwriter, the producer, the engineer. To me, I view them all kind of, as a part of this miraculous thing called music. So that's what I hope they get from it. Wouldn't hurt if they said, he's a pretty nice guy.
Paul Leslie, I'm going to open up the airwaves now, and I'm going to let you just talk.
Oh, that's pretty intimidating. And I do that from time to time too. Uh,
What do you want to say to people?
what do I want to say to people? I want to say to people that if they truly, truly believe something, and if they're the only one in the room who feels that way, and maybe even somebody who is a purported expert on it is saying something different, don't dismiss their expertise. Don't dismiss what they're saying, but really, really think about why they're saying it, why you are thinking it. Why do I think this way? Why am I saying this? Why do I feel so strongly about it? Take a moment, think about why you think it, think about what their motivation may be. And if you come to the conclusion that you still feel that way, and even if you think, oh, well, people are going to think that my opinion is silly, or, oh, people are going to say that you know, I'm not paying attention to X, Y, or Z. If you still think so, if you don't agree with something, and or if whatever it is that your stance is, you owe it to everybody else and yourself to say what you truly believe. That's what I would say.
Wow, that's heavy. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the space.
Yeah, well, absolutely. um, how can people find you?
Well, I have a website. It's thepaulleslie.com. And there's also a YouTube channel. I've been, for the longest time, I was always trying to push just my audio feed. I didn't like video. And it was, over the last few years, I had so many people saying, you have to do video. This is the era we're in. So the YouTube channel, which if you go on YouTube and you look up Paul Leslie, I'm trying to grow the YouTube channel. So either go to the website, or it would mean a lot if you subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And subscribe to this channel too while you're there, by the way.
Oh, he's talking about the truth about music. Thank you, Paul. I really appreciate that.
Yes, sir. I am a subscriber.
Yes, I noticed that. Thank you very much. Well, I
My
want to
pleasure.
thank you for agreeing to interview me. Of course, as an interviewer, you have the right to remain private. And not only have you agreed to do this with me, there's a chance that you may be interviewing me in the near future, and that ought to be a lot of fun.
That's right. But when we talk, and this is another thing that I'm trying to do more and more and more, I like to be in the room with the person. I want to meet that person, look them eyeball to eyeball whenever I possibly can, which isn't possible all the time, but yes, I
Yeah,
would be honored
I
to meet
can't.
you.
Yes, I can't wait. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll make sure everybody who subscribes to this channel knows about that interview as well. Paul Leslie, thank you not only for this interview, but for your lifetime of work. It's from the little I've been able to see, it's stellar stuff, and I'm very appreciative of the work you've done as an archivist and as a journalist. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cole. And I have never, I've been interviewed a couple times, and I have never had somebody who paid so much attention to what I do. Uh, it's very, it's very much an honor that you watched so many of these, and the questions were heartfelt. I feel that from you, and I'm really, really, I'm a little warm actually, because it's such a nice thing that I feel just happened.
Well, I'm glad I was able to give you back the gift that I think you give your guests. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I
A-
appreciate it.
And we want to thank you too, audience. You're the important piece of the equation. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your likes. Thank you for your subscriptions. Keep them coming. If there's people you want me to talk to, as Paul and I have discussed, it doesn't matter whether they're famous or not. Just send them my way. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
All right. Until next time.